The pregnancy test trembled in Emily's hands as she stared at the two pink lines. My wife's face was a mixture of happiness and something else, fear, maybe. At the time, I didn't understand why. "Daniel, we're going to have a baby," she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around me. I hugged her back, but something felt off. We had been married for 3 years and had always been extremely careful. I never skipped protection, every single time, no exceptions. We had both agreed to wait a few more years before starting a family. But how? I asked, still trying to process what I was seeing. "We always use protection." Emily's expression shifted slightly. "Maybe one broke. It happens, right? Does it even matter? We're having a baby." She kissed me before I could respond, her excitement drowning out my confusion. I wish I had paid more attention back then, to the late nights at the office, the new yoga classes she suddenly started taking, the recent password changes on her phone. Emily had always been independent, but something about her behavior in the past few months felt different. I just couldn't figure out what. That evening, while Emily was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. I wasn't the type to snoop, but the preview notification caught my eye. "Mark, can't wait to see you tomorrow. Last time was." The rest was hidden, but my heart was already pounding. I knew a Mark from her office, the new project manager who had transferred in 6 months ago. Emily had mentioned him a few times, always in casual conversation about work. But something about this message felt wrong. I heard the shower turn off and quickly stepped away from her phone. That night, as Emily slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake, my mind racing. The timing of the pregnancy, the suspicious messages, the changes in her behavior, it all started forming a picture I wasn't ready to accept. The next morning, I took a half-day off work. I didn't tell Emily. Instead of heading home, I parked across from her office building. Spying on my wife made me sick to my stomach, but the alternative, living in doubt, felt worse. At 2:15 p.m., I watched as Emily left the building. But she wasn't heading toward her car. Instead, she walked 2 blocks to a small cafe, where a tall, well-dressed man was waiting outside. "Mark." He greeted her with a familiarity that made my stomach turn, his hand lingering on her lower back as they walked inside together. I waited 20 minutes before following them in. But they weren't in the main seating area. The couple who just came in. I asked the barista. They went upstairs to the private dining section. My hands were shaking as I climbed those stairs. Every step brought me closer to the truth I already suspected but desperately wished wasn't real. The private dining area was empty, except for a door leading to a small balcony. Through the glass, I saw them. Emily was pressed against the railing, Mark's hands on her waist as they kissed. My world tilted. I stood frozen, watching as my pregnant wife wrapped her arms around another man's neck with painful familiarity. I must have made some sound, because Emily's eyes suddenly met mine through the glass. The color drained from her face. "Daniel." She pushed Mark away, quickly adjusting her blouse. "This isn't what it looks like. I can explain." But I was already walking away, my vision blurring. Emily's heels clicked on the pavement as she ran after me, calling my name. "Daniel, please, it's not what you think. Mark and I, it was just a mistake. A one-time thing." I stopped and turned to her, my voice eerily calm. "A one-time thing?" I let out a cold laugh. "Is that why you're carrying his child?" Her face crumpled. "No. The baby is yours, Daniel. I swear it is. We always use protection, Emily. Every single time. Do you really think I'm that stupid?" Mark stepped forward, his professional demeanor cracking under the weight of the situation. "Maybe we should." "Stay out of this," I snapped. I turned back to my wife. "How long?" Her eyes darted between Mark and me. "Daniel, please, can we talk about this at home?" "How long?" She wrapped her arms around herself, tears streaming down her face. "4 months," she whispered. But it didn't mean anything. I love you, Daniel. You're my husband. Mark was just a mistake. I interrupted. Just something that happened. She nodded desperately. No, Emily. Things don't just happen. You made choices. Every lie about working late. Every time you came home and kissed me after being with him. Those were all choices. Mark stepped forward again, trying to maintain control. Look, Daniel, I know this is a shock. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. A shock. Finding out my wife is pregnant with her boss's baby while we've been using protection every time for our entire marriage? Yeah, I'd say that's a shock. Emily's mascara streaked down her face. Please, Daniel. We can fix this. I'll quit my job. I'll cut off all contact with Mark. Please don't throw away our marriage. I stared at her. And for the first time, I didn't see my wife, I saw a stranger. The marriage? I said quietly. You threw that away the first time you decided to sleep with him. You just didn't bother to tell me. As I walked away, Emily called after me, her voice cracking. Daniel. Please, we need to talk about this. I didn't turn around. I had calls to make, starting with my lawyer. The next few days passed in a blur of anger and careful planning. I stayed at my brother Ethan's place, ignoring Emily's endless calls and messages. She cycled between desperate apologies, furious accusations that I was being unreasonable, and tearful pleas about our baby. Each message only solidified my decision. You're going to have to talk to her eventually, Ethan said one evening as I ignored yet another call. If only to figure out how you want to handle the divorce. I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been compiling a timeline of suspicious dates and incidents from the past 4 months. Oh, I'll talk to her, I said. But on my terms. The thing about Emily was that she had always underestimated me. She saw my trust as naivety, my patience as weakness. Even now, she probably thought that if she begged hard enough, I'd eventually forgive her. She had no idea that while she was leaving voicemails pleading for another chance, I was methodically dismantling the life we had built together. The first step was consulting our family lawyer, Robert. He had handled my parents' estate after their accident 2 years ago, and I trusted him completely. The pregnancy complicates things, Robert warned during our meeting. Even if you're not the biological father, if you're still married when the child is born. I won't be, I interrupted. How fast can we file? The next step was harder. I drove to Emily's parents' house, the same house where I had asked for their blessing before proposing to her. Her mother, Linda, opened the door with a warm smile that quickly faded when she saw my face. Daniel, what's wrong? Emily's been calling us, but she won't say what happened. I told them everything. They deserved to know why their daughter's marriage was falling apart. Linda cried. Her father, Frank, sat in stone-cold silence, his expression growing darker with every detail. We didn't raise her to be this person, Linda whispered when I finished. No, I agreed. But it's who she chose to be. As I was leaving, Frank stopped me. Whatever you're planning, he said quietly, she earned it. Their support should have felt like a victory. Instead, it just emphasized how deeply Emily had betrayed everyone who loved her. Back at Ethan's place, I received an email from Mark's wife, Olivia. Yes, he was married too. Something Emily had conveniently failed to mention. I had found Olivia's contact information through some basic social media digging and sent her a detailed message outlining everything I had discovered. Her response was brief, "Can we meet? There's more you should know." We met at a small diner the next morning. Olivia was a petite woman with tired eyes and a determined expression. She came prepared, placing a stack of papers on the table between us. "Mark's done this before," she said without preamble, sliding the documents toward me. 2 years ago, with another employee. She got pregnant too. The company paid her off and transferred her to the London office. My grip tightened around my coffee cup. "And you stayed with him?" "We have kids," she said simply. "But I've been gathering evidence ever since, bank statements, hotel receipts, emails. I was waiting for the right moment. Your wife's pregnancy just moved up my timeline. I flipped through the documents, my mind racing. Does Mark know you have all this? Olivia gave a grim smile. Not yet. But he will. She leaned forward. The question is, do you want to coordinate our moves, or should we handle our spouses separately? I thought about it for a moment. I think we can help each other. I'm listening. And as I laid out my plan, I saw the same cold determination in Olivia's eyes that I felt in my own. Emily and Mark thought they had been playing a game, that they were the only ones who could be clever and deceptive. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. A week passed. I had ignored Emily's calls long enough. I finally agreed to meet her at our house. Walking in felt surreal, everything looked exactly as I had left it, yet nothing was the same. Emily sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea. She looked smaller somehow, deflated. You've lost weight, she said softly as I sat down. Are you eating? I scoffed. Let's not pretend you care about my well-being. My voice was calm. Controlled. I'm here because we need to discuss practical matters. Her face crumpled. Of course I care, Daniel. I know I messed up, terribly. But I love you. We can work through this. We can go to counseling, rebuild trust. I raised an eyebrow. Like you rebuilt trust with Mark's wife. Emily went pale. What? I slid my phone across the table and pressed play. Mark's voice filled the room, agitated and desperate. Olivia had recorded one of their recent arguments. He was panicked about their situation, about how things had spiraled out of control. You've been talking to Olivia? Emily whispered. Her voice trembled. Daniel, whatever she told you. She told me everything, I cut in. About Mark's pattern of seducing employees. About the last woman he got pregnant before you. About how the company covered it up and sent her to London. Emily's lip quivered. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, I corrected. Just like you didn't want to think about how this would destroy me when I found out. I pulled a manila envelope from my bag and slid it across the table. Divorce papers. Emily's hands shook as she opened the envelope. You can't just throw away 3 years of marriage. You did that already. I'm just making it official. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. And what about Mark? She asked, a hint of her old defiance creeping back in. Are you planning some kind of revenge? I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Mark's situation is handling itself. Olivia is very thorough. She's been gathering evidence for years. The company board received an interesting package of documents this morning. Emily's breath caught. What did you do? Me? Nothing. I leaned back. But it turns out companies don't like executives who habitually sleep with subordinates, especially when those subordinates file complaints about workplace harassment. That's a lie, she gasped. Mark never forced me into anything. Then I'm sure you'll have no problem stating that under oath. The color drained from her face as she realized what was happening. Her job. Her reputation. The life she had built for herself, it was all collapsing. You have 24 hours to sign those papers, I said as I stood up. After that, things get considerably more complicated for everyone involved. As I reached the door, Emily's voice broke. I never meant to hurt you, Daniel. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. The problem, Emily, is that I don't believe anything you say anymore. And then I walked away. The company board's emergency meeting lasted 3 hours. I knew because Olivia texted me updates from the parking lot, where she waited with her lawyer. When Mark finally emerged from the building, security escorting him out, a cardboard box of his belongings in his hands, his face had the hollow look of a man watching his entire life collapse in real time. Emily signed the divorce papers that evening. Not because of my deadline, but because Mark had already thrown her under the bus. Olivia forwarded me the email he had sent to the board, his desperate attempt to save himself. He claimed that Emily had pursued him aggressively, that she had manipulated him with threats of harassment claims if he didn't continue their affair. He even attached carefully selected text messages to support his story. "Classic Mark," Olivia commented when we met for coffee the next day. I watched as Emily's carefully constructed world unraveled. Her resignation was requested by HR the next morning. The company's legal team was thorough in their damage control. They offered her a modest severance package and a strict non-disclosure agreement, far less than what Mark's previous mistress had received. They weren't taking chances this time, not with Olivia's evidence proving a pattern of corporate cover-ups. Emily's parents refused to let her move back home. "Actions have consequences," Frank had said when she called them in tears. Linda later told me they had offered to help her find a therapist instead. "She needs to understand why she does these things," she had explained, her voice heavy with maternal grief. "This isn't the daughter we raised." But perhaps the most unexpected blow came from Emily's sister, Megan. She had been Emily's closest confidant, always on her side, until now. Megan publicly cut ties with her through a scathing social media post about betrayal and family values. It went viral within their social circle, forcing Emily to shut down all her accounts as former friends and colleagues started connecting the dots. Mark didn't fare much better. Olivia's divorce filing was brutal. She provided undeniable proof of his multiple affairs, unauthorized use of company funds for personal outings, and financial mismanagement. His reputation in the industry was ruined. The last I heard, he was considering moving to another state to start over. 3 months later, I ran into Emily one last time. She was leaving a doctor's appointment as I was walking into the coffee shop next door. Her pregnancy was showing now, a visible reminder of the lies that had destroyed our marriage. She hesitated before speaking. "Daniel," she said awkwardly. "I've been wanting to reach out." "Don't." My voice was quiet but firm. "Please, just let me say this." Her eyes were clear, lacking the usual manipulation I had come to recognize so well. "You were right about everything," she admitted. "I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I did what I did. I know it doesn't change anything, but I truly am sorry. Not just for the affair, but for who I became. For who I was all along." I studied her face, the face I had once known better than my own. "You know what the worst part was, Emily?" I finally said. "Not the affair. Not even the baby. It was realizing that every morning, for months, you woke up next to me, looked me in the eye, and chose to lie. Over and over again." Her eyes filled with tears. "That kind of betrayal doesn't just break trust," I continued. "It breaks the foundation of who we thought we were." She wiped her face, nodding. "I know. I destroyed something precious. And I have to live with that." She took a shaky breath. I hope someday you can forgive me. Not for my sake, but for yours. You deserve peace." I exhaled slowly. "I have peace," I said. "The moment I stopped trying to understand why you did it and simply accepted that you did, I found peace." She blinked rapidly, struggling to keep her composure. "I don't hate you anymore, Emily," I added. "I don't feel anything for you at all." And with that, I walked past her into the coffee shop. I ordered my drink and never looked back. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about causing pain or destruction. Sometimes, it's about walking away and letting people face the natural consequences of their own choices. Emily and Mark had built their relationship on lies and betrayal. All I had to do was step back and watch it burn itself to the ground. As I left the cafe, my phone buzzed with a message from my real estate agent. There was a promising house listing in another city. It was time for a fresh start. A place where every street corner didn't hold memories of betrayal. As I drove to view the property, I felt lighter. Emily had taught me a lesson about trust and consequences. It wasn't the lesson she had intended, but it was one I would never forget. Thank you for listening to the story until the end. Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video, I concluded, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The narrative, once a personal ordeal, had evolved into a broader message of caution, resilience, and the enduring quest for integrity in the face of betrayal.